Welcome to the first episode of a new podcast. It's our LeftLion Interviews podcast, and today's guest is the radio and nightclub DJ Graeme Park. My name is Jared Wilson. I'm the editor-in-chief of LeftLion, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Graeme over a video call on a Monday morning in late June 2024. Graeme began his career in Nottingham, first moving here as a teenager. His life as a DJ started when he got a job in the local record shop Selectadisc, which I'm sure many of our listeners will remember as fondly as I do. From there, he started DJing in Nottingham nightclubs and ended up becoming one of the main DJs at the seminal Manchester nightclub, the Hacienda. He has since become one of the leading figures in the UK rave and house music scene. He has now been playing records for a living for over 5 different decades. He's also played with an orchestra as Hacienda Classical, hosted hundreds of radio shows, and he worked as a consultant on the 2002 Steve Coogan film 24 Hour Party People. We discuss all this and more over the next hour. Enjoy.
Hi, this is Sophie from LeftLion, Nottingham's iconic culture magazine. Each month we publish a beautiful free magazine that shines a light on the art, music, food, literature and more that makes Nottingham such a vibrant and creative city to live in. It's a bit unusual for a local print magazine to exist these days, but we've managed to keep going for over 20 years, giving the city's artists, photographers and writers a platform to publish their work. We distribute 15,000 copies in over 300 venues across the county, and you can find LeftLion in every local library, every Castle Rock pub, in all active Nottingham leisure centres, and all the best bars, cafes and hangouts in Nottingham. If you're ever in town at the start of the month, you may have seen our LeftLion bike rolling around the streets. In line with our pledge to be a carbon neutral company, we deliver our magazines on foot, by electric bicycle or where strictly necessary by van. You can also read the full magazine and lots more for free at leftlion.co.uk. Check out the events listings on our website to find out what's going on in Notts, and if you'd like to promote your business or organisation with us, please visit leftlion.co.uk/advertise.
Thank you for joining us, Graeme, DJ and house music and Selectadisc legend that you are, and Hacienda obviously. Let's start talking about Nottingham first. So you moved here in the early 80s and you were in bands around here then. Tell us a bit about who you were then and what those bands were.
Well, I only ended up in Nottingham because my parents moved to Lincolnshire when I was about 15 or 16, and I didn't want to move to England. I wanted to stay and finish my hires in Scotland, which I did. But then I came down to visit, and I'd never been to England in my life. And I thought it's all right down here because where we lived in Lincolnshire, Nottingham was quite close. And so I used to come to Nottingham quite a lot, and I thought I really like this city. And used to go and visit Selectadisc. But my dad used to work for Next, so every morning he'd be driving all round the Midlands. So I would jump in with him and go to Nottingham, Leicester, Derby, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Coventry, basically all these great cities and towns, and go to record shops. But then after about 2 or 3 years, my dad changed jobs again, so the family moved back to Scotland. But I went, no, I like it down here, but I didn't want to stay in Lincolnshire. No disrespect to the people of Lincolnshire. So I thought I'll move to Nottingham because I really like Nottingham, and basically hung about in Selectadisc all the time, and ended up getting asked to help out. Because when I was at school in Scotland, I used to work in a record shop on a Saturday, and so obviously mentioned this as I got to know the people who worked in Selectadisc. And then one day they said, you worked at a record shop before, we're short staffed, can you help out? And very quickly ended up running the singles and second-hand department in the Brother-Smith Gate branch, which was, I was like 18 or 19, and that was just, to me, the best job in the world. And while I was living in Lincolnshire, I played saxophone and played in bands there, and we used to do gigs in Nottingham. And then when I moved to Nottingham, somebody in a band approached me, said, "Oh, you play saxophone, would you fancy coming to join our band?" Which I did. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play in a band. I did a bit of singing as well in the band. But the guy who owns Selectadisc, the late Brian Selby, who was a fantastic man, bought a nightclub. He bought the Ad Lib Club and said he was going to change the way. It was a reggae club. We thought he's mad buying a reggae club. And then he just said, well, no, it's not going to be a reggae club anymore. It's going to be called The Garage. And he wanted me to DJ because his office was on the same floor as the singles and second-hand department. And his office door was always open. And he just said, "Oh, I like the music that you play in the shop. I want you to come and DJ at the club." I was 19, didn't really want to be a DJ because I just wanted to play in bands. But I loved working in the record shop so much. I thought, well, I better DJ for the boss. I don't want to lose my job. And within a few weeks, couple of months, I'd left the band. That was it, because I thought this is what I want to do. I want to DJ because basically I got to play. Basically, and even today, that was 40 years ago when I started DJing. But even today, I still do the same thing, which is play music I really like, and people seem to really like the music I play. And also, as well, when you're in a band, I love playing in bands. In fact, you could argue with Hacienda Classical, I've actually gone back to playing in a band, albeit on a much, much bigger scale. But, with a band, you have to rehearse. You've got to hire a van to move your equipment about. You've got to pay the drummer's girlfriend to do the door. You've got to sound check. You've got to set your equipment up. And then at the end, this is in the early 80s, at the end of the gig, you might be lucky to go home with a fiver or a tenner. But my first DJ gig at the Garage in Nottingham, 25 quid, and it was all mine. I didn't have to rehearse. I just played records. So I thought, well, yeah, I'll give this a go. Of course, now with Hacienda Classical, this crew to do all the work. I've got my own sound tech person and roadie who does everything. I just turn up and we rehearse and sound check, and then I do the gigs. So it's a bit different now. So I suppose I've ended up doing what I did want to do, but the DJing kind of took over. And of course, in the early 80s, 84 when I started, I was just playing a real eclectic mix of stuff, like the kind of poppy funk stuff like the Orange Juice and the Blow Monkeys and Aztec Camera, and then all the electronic stuff like Cabaret Voltaire and Human League and New Order, obviously, but also some soul funk, disco, which is what I was kind of into when I was younger, and all the early hip hop stuff came along. But then in '86, that's when house started to appear, and then house kind of took over in the end, didn't it? But yeah, so I've still got eclectic tastes, which I think is reflected in my weekly radio show. And then if you were in my car on a long journey, you'd be quite surprised at this type of stuff I listen to. I listen to new music that I might want to play on the way to a gig. But as soon as I finish the gig, if I'm driving home in the middle of the night or the next morning, the last thing I listen to is kind of stuff I'd play in a club. So basically DJing just really, really ticked all the boxes for me. And I thought, well, I'll do this for a little while, see where it goes. I can always go back to being in a band because I play saxophone. But I just stuck with it. And here we are 40 years later, and I'm still doing it.
Mm. So just going back a little bit to Selectadisc, tell us about some of the characters you met there. I mean, it's remembered so fondly in this city, I think. And of
Yeah.
course, you were part of that brilliant BBC documentary
Oh
on BBC
yeah,
Sounds.
that's right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, there was Jeff, who was the manager of the Smith Gate branch. He was great because I always thought he had really cool glasses, and I was always very envious of his jet black thick head of hair that he put Bro Cream in. But then Jim was the manager of Market Street branch, and he was. I mean, he's. I've I did see him a few years ago actually, because he was quite involved in the London Selectadisc in Soho as well. Because when I lived in
yes,
London, I used to bump into him when I was in Soho. It was quite good. There was a lad called Basil who works in Market Street who was great fun. He did a bit of DJing in the garage as well. Um, then I mean, those are the three people I really remember. But I mean, originally when I started there, the singles and second hand department was run by a guy called Melvin. I'm not sure he's with us anymore. But I only got to look after that floor when he decided to leave, not long after I joined. Um, um, but it was just a great record shop to work in because unlike our price, uh, or HMV, which just stocked, you know, the stuff in the charts and the kind of big acts. It's less this. Yeah, we sold stuff that's in the charts because that's where the money was. You kind of big selling tracks. But we just would stock some really amazing back catalogs of like big, independent labels and independent acts. And running that singles and second hand department was great for me because for the 2 years or 18 months I worked there before I DJ'd, when you're in charge of the second hand department, people are bringing in all these like amazing classic albums and old singles that people they needed the money or they didn't want them anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, these are amazing. So I'd end up buying pretty much half of the stuff that came in for myself. And obviously, every time I still proudly own every single factory records vinyl release in every format because I was working in a record shop, and so I was a big factory records fan, and lots of like independent labels and lots of like um, limited edition stuff. I just got access to it, and listening to all that new stuff meant that it was just it was the best way, the kind of best kind of I suppose education for becoming a DJ.
Hmm. So you've mentioned factory, and obviously, so at a certain point you got poached and presumably moved to Manchester.
No,
Um,
well, I didn't move to Manchester until a week after the Hacienda closed. Ironically, I got I met Mike Pickering in 1987 at an ID magazine photo shoot in London about this new breed of kind of underground DJ. We hit it off straight away because I knew who Mike was because I owned Quando Quango records and I was a big fan of the first T-Coy single, Carino. So I knew who he was, and I was very excited to meet Mike. But I was very excited when he said, "Oh no, I know who you are. I've heard about what you're doing at the garage in Nottingham," which is quite nice. And we hit it off because we were the only non-Southerners who were involved in this photo shoot. Because the thing about the media back then, ID magazine, The Face, Blitz, even like Record Mirror, Music Week, NME Sounds, Melody Maker, they were all so London centric. They really, really were. And it was so frustrating to keep reading about this. Everything was happening in London like it was the center of the universe. And Mike and I both thought this was a complete nonsense. So that's why we hit it off. And we shared a taxi. He was getting the train home to Manchester from Euston. I was getting the train back to Nottingham from St Pancras. So we shared a taxi to the Euston Road, exchanged phone numbers, and went our separate ways and kept in touch. And we both kept in touch and thought it would be good to put on a night at Hacienda called the Northern House Review and invite all the media up from London to say, look, this big thing called house music is happening and you're ignoring it. Because this was before, I don't want to mention any names, but I think you'll know who I mean. Certain people went to Ibiza and allegedly discovered everything, conveniently ignoring the fact that in the Midlands and the north of England and in parts of Scotland, this house thing was already massive. So we put on the Northern House Review, invited everyone up, and that was a great success. And then a few weeks later, Mike called me up and said, look, I'm going on holiday for 3 weeks. Would you like to cover my Friday night, nude night, which I did. And of course, I was really, really thrilled to do this because, as I said earlier, I was a big Factory Records fan. And even though I lived in Nottingham, I used to still sometimes go to gigs at the Hacienda because it was the Factory Records nightclub. Stay up all night to get the first train home via Sheffield used to take bloody ages. So I did the Hacienda for 3 weeks, but you see, there was a kind of tenuous connection between Nottingham and Manchester, and the fact that a guy called Paul Mason, who used to be the manager of Rock City, went to be the manager of the Hacienda. So that probably had something to do with me getting asked to stay when Mike returned from holiday, and I stayed. And basically every Friday, I would drive up to. Well, no, I couldn't drive when I first started Hacienda. I used to get the train up to Manchester, stay at Mike's, and then get the train back the next day to do the garage. But then I did learn to drive and used to drive up to Manchester via Chesterfield and the kind of through the Peak District, which is a fantastic drive. I still sometimes do it now if I'm driving up north and I go anywhere near the East Midlands, and I think, you know what, for old time's sake, I'm going to take that Chesterfield Peak District drive for old time's sake. And I lived in yeah, so I lived in Manchester. Sorry, I lived in Nottingham and went to Manchester every Friday and came back on Saturday. Then I moved to London and used to get the train or fly to Manchester every Friday, and then sometimes I would drive. But sometimes I would drive because on Saturday I'd go from Manchester to Nottingham, do the garage, and then drive back to London on a Sunday. And I was still doing the lead mill in Sheffield on a Wednesday and the fan club in Leicester. So there's a lot of driving actually, and didn't actually move to Manchester until the week after the Hacienda closed. When the Hacienda closed in 1997, I'd stopped doing it weekly. I'd gone to do it monthly. So the start of 97, we agreed that I was turning down so many offers to do stuff abroad and do other clubs, because by the mid to late 90s, you had Ministry of Sound, you had Cream, Renaissance, Gatecrasher, and loads and loads of like great club nights everywhere. And I thought, I'm turning all this work. Oh, well, there was a club called UK in the West Midlands in Wolverhampton, I think. Lots of great things. So we agreed that after 9 years at Hacienda, I would go monthly. And so the night the Hacienda closed, I wasn't even there. I was in Australia. And then but I'd already agreed with Kiss FM in Manchester. I had a Sunday afternoon show that I would start doing weekday afternoons when I got back from Australia. So that's when I thought, well, okay, I've never lived in Manchester. despite being at Hacienda for 9 years, I'm still doing it every month. I can't live in London and do a daily radio show in Manchester. I'll move to Manchester. So we agreed everything. And then the deal was get back from Australia and start doing my daily radio show. And of course, when I was in Australia, the Hacienda closed. But I still had to move to Manchester. So I moved to Manchester in 1997.
So tell us about some of those characters at the Hacienda that everyone knows. Any particular memories of Tony Wilson, New Order, the Happy Mondays?
Tony Wilson was absolutely an amazing person because he was like the person who kind of inspired everyone, you know. And a guy called Rob Gretton as well, who was New Order's manager. But Tony and Rob, the kind of Hacienda was pretty much their baby, which New Order funded without even realizing they were funding it. If you read Peter Hook's book, How Not to Run a Nightclub, that pretty much sums it up. But Tony Wilson, he was there a lot, and he just let everyone get on with doing it. He didn't ever try and tell us that we should be playing certain types of music or doing it in a certain way. He just let us all do it, and he was an absolutely amazing, quite inspirational character, and very, very clever, very, very clued up as to what the zeitgeist of society was. But also a New Order were always down there. Peter Hook was probably the most enthusiastic about the Hacienda, which explains why he now owns the name and the brand. And I work very closely with Hookie on Hacienda Classical because we couldn't do it without him. The others from New Order, Bernard was there quite a bit, but they weren't as enthusiastic about the club as Hookie was, probably because of the fact it was costing them so much money, because it lost loads of money. But all of the artists and bands that you associate with Manchester, especially around the so-called Manchester period, they were in and out of Hacienda all the time. And I think if you listen to some of the music, especially Happy Mondays, but even some of the Stone Roses stuff, you can tell they went to the Hacienda because of if they're in that club listening to acid house music and Italian house music and Chicago house music and Detroit techno, some of those rhythms and some of the kind of acid influences, especially in Happy Mondays, but even in some of the Stone Roses stuff, those influences you can hear, because if they're there every week and then obviously indulging, like taking ecstasy and then going into the studio, then obviously, if you've been having a great time, like dancing to house music, some of that's going to creep in to what you do. But if you talk to the Gallagher brothers, they talk very, very fondly about nights at Hacienda. Happy Mondays, well, Sean and Bez, they were there all the time, but their memories of Hacienda are pretty hazy when I talk to them anyway, for obvious reasons. But, in Spiral Carpets, Clint Boom was there a lot. I mean, even Mick Hucknall used to pop his head down Hacienda, They were all there, and we didn't think of them as like these kind of pop stars. They were just like, oh, here's so and so. I'm just, and there's always after parties to go to as well. So it was a very creative time. I think the fact that Hacienda was at its peak, and people were coming from not just from all over the Northwest, from all over the country, and everyone was kind of feeding off each other creatively. It was a very exciting time.
So everybody talks about the Summer of Love in 1988. Is it that defined that summer, or what does that mean to you?
Well, 88 and 89 were pretty much very similar. But it was a very exciting time because all the early house stuff started to appear in '86. And I was aware that Mike Pickering was playing it in Manchester, and he was aware that I was playing it in the East Midlands. Because, I mean, apart from the garage, I was also doing nights in Derby, the Blue Note in Derby, 20th century in Derby, the Fan Club in Leicester, and what was that other great club in Leicester? Helsinki. That was amazing. I loved playing at Helsinki. It was like a bar, but like a bar / club. But yeah, '86 is like house music. It started to appear, and so in the East Midlands and in the Northwest, it started to creep into DJ sets. And then '87, it got even more prominent because there was more of it coming along. But I think when I did the Northern House Review with Mike, which was in February '88, there wasn't any ecstasy. But when I went back to cover for Mike in May '88, I remember Mike was adamant. I know you've done the Hacienda before. I know you've visited Hacienda many times, but if you're going to cover for me for 3 weeks, you have to come up the week before you do it. I'm like, I can't because I've got gigs. Well, you've got to, otherwise you're not doing it. Okay, I'll come up. I don't understand why. Well, when I went up the week before Mike went on holiday, oh my God, I immediately, when I walked in the door of the Hacienda, I was like, what the hell? What's happened? Something's different, because everybody was dressed down. Everyone had like dungarees, acid wash t-shirts, smiley t-shirts, bandanas, and a lot of the girls were wearing like just bikini tops and denim shorts. And at that period of time, people kind of got dressed up to go to clubs, certainly alternative clubs. Like if you people look like they'd walked out the pages of ID magazine or the Face magazine, because anyone who went to the garage in Nottingham in that kind of mid-'80s period, everyone was really kind of properly had spent a lot on how they looked. I mean, like in Nottingham, in Burnsmith Gate, Selectadisc, opposite us was a shop called Birdcage, which everyone, all the fashionistas went there, and it was like kind of quite wide shoulder pads, jackets for the guys, and the Paul Smith shop as well around the corner from Burnsmith Gate. So I went into Hacienda and I was like, what the hell has happened here? Look at what's going on. And getting from the front door to the DJ booth, the place was packed. But everyone had this mad look in their eyes. I mean, I'm like, what the hell? I was like, didn't understand what was happening. I go up to the DJ box, knock on the door. Best DJ box in the world, by the way, the Hacienda DJ box, because it had a stable door. So if anyone knocked on the door, you could open the top half of the door and keep people out. It was brilliant. So I knocked on the DJ box door. Mike opened up the top half of the door, and he was dressed like everyone else and had this mad, wild look in his eyes. I'm like, Mike, and he went, come in. And he opened the door. I came in, but as soon as he closed the door, he gave me this really massive and a bit sweaty hug. And I was like, what's happening? Why are you hugging me? Right? Because, back then, men didn't hug each other, And then he said, right, this is why you have to come up. Look at this, blah, blah, blah. I just was really enthusiastic about what was going on. And then I said, what's happening? And he went, this is what's happened. He got a little pill out of his pocket and broke it in half and said, you've got to have half of one of these and you'll totally understand it. And I'm like, nah, mate, drugs. No, I don't do drugs. But the girl I was with said, well, I'll have it then. So it's because she popped it. I said, oh, well, in that case, I will. Anyway, 20 minutes later, while on the dance floor, Mike plays The Party by Craze. And suddenly I'm like, oh, God, what the hell? And I totally understood what was going on there. I thought, I get it. And I think it was it was like the stars aligned. It was like the fact that it was the venue, this big, vast, huge venue, and the music, the ecstasy, and the fact that it was the people in Manchester. All these things aligned, and that was kind of, I think, arguably the birth of the kind of what we call rave culture. And it was just the most amazing period. And I did it for 3 weeks on my own. And it was just incredible. So different to what was happening in Nottingham. Even though I was playing the same music, pretty much the same music, all the early house stuff. Because by then, by 88, even in Nottingham, you know, all that kind of Talking Heads, New Order, Human League, Cabaret Voltaire, soul, funk, disco, even the hip hop, I was playing less and less and less because the standard of all this early house music and the quantity, it just took over. I couldn't not play it. But although some people at the garage are like, oh, I don't like all this house music, for every one person who said, "Oh, I'm not coming anymore," there was 5 new people would come because all around the East Midlands, like Derby, Leicester, and Nottingham, they're all like connected, aren't they? People would travel, and even people from South Yorkshire, all the Jive Turkey crew in South Yorkshire, they'd come down to the garage because if you wanted to hear those early house tracks, there weren't that many places playing them, and I was very lucky to have the opportunity every Saturday to play from 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. to do this. So although I was playing very similar stuff in Manchester as I was in Nottingham, the difference was ecstasy and noticeably different because the atmosphere was different. I mean, don't get me wrong, the atmosphere at the garage in that small room upstairs, 500 people crammed into the small room, the atmosphere was incredible. But people in Nottingham, when I said, well, I'm doing Hacienda every Friday now, some of my friends go, can we come up? Yeah, you got to come up. You've got to come up. And I remember saying to them, but maybe don't dress up as much as you might do in Nottingham. But people not in Manchester, so, oh, you're at the garage in Nottingham on a Saturday, we might come down. So what happened slowly, people from Nottingham would come up to Manchester, have an ecstasy. And like, oh my God, people from Manchester, though, would come down to the garage and go, people don't take ecstasy here. So next time they bring ecstasy with them. So very slowly, Nottingham started to change. But then very, very quickly, Nottingham changed. So then within about 6 weeks of me starting Fridays at the Hacienda, within 6 weeks, suddenly the garage was like a small Hacienda. And that's when, by the summer, so by June, July 88, this kind of everything started to spread around the country. Because back in those days, there was less clubs, less DJs. And if you wanted to hear house music, you had to travel, and people would travel. So if people are traveling around the country, then obviously the fashion, the style, the drugs, the culture starts to spread as well. And so summer 88 was like when it all kind of really, really took off very quickly. And then by late summer, I think it was September, it finally got big in London because Nicky Holloway put on a night at the Astoria called The Trip. Now, up until then, yes, there were DJs in London playing house music, but there's no way you could call it a scene. London was still into kind of rare groove and dressing up. And it wasn't until late summer that kind of London kind of it took off in London. But that meant that the following summer, this kind of North/Midlands thing expanded, and then by the following summer, the whole country. So when people talk about summer, second summer of love, to me, it's always 88 and 89. But then by then 89 is when things start to go a bit sour at Hacienda because of the gangs and the drug, the battle to have the right to sell ecstasy in the Hacienda. But that's another story that's been well documented elsewhere. But those 2 summers were just that's when I think Mike and I, that was just every single Friday without fail was just absolutely immense. But it was also the New Year's Eves and the Christmas Eves and the birthday party, which was always on the day. Even if the Hacienda's birthday party was a Sunday or a Tuesday, we always just do it on the exact day. And it was just incredible times of people traveling from Scotland, from Carlisle, from the northeast, from there's a massive Stoke posse used to come up. People from Nottingham and the East Midlands would come up, London, the southwest. It was just an incredible time.
Oh. So around that summer of love, did you have any dealings with DIY, Nottingham's infamous sound system?
Yeah, no, I did, because sometimes after the garage finished at 2:00, because don't forget, back then pubs and bars shut at 11, clubs opened at 10. Although Hacienda, we had to open at 9 because of the queues. But the garage opened at 9 or 10 and finished at 2. But that 88, certainly 89, quite often there would be an after party, an outdoor, especially in the summer, somewhere in Nottingham. And I would end up going along to them, not to DJ though, just to go along and listen and be part of it, because I was still probably taking indulging myself. So yeah, but the thing is, I'd never really, I knew them, but I never really got to know the DIY guys very well, because obviously I was at that period. I was Wednesdays Sheffield, Thursdays Leicester, Fridays Manchester, Saturdays Nottingham, Sundays back to London. So I wasn't living in Nottingham around the time the DIY lot started doing their thing. But it was a very special time. But also as well, certainly 88 is when they started, but 89 in the summer, there was all pretty much most weekends, whether it was a Friday night or a Saturday night, after the Hacienda closed or after the garage closed, I would end up going to DJ at an illegal rave somewhere in the north or the Midlands in a field. In the winter, it would be an illegal warehouse party, because in the north of England and in the Midlands, this was all down to the Thatcher government at the time, industries were being shut down or closing down, or industries were dying, and there were a lot of empty warehouses, whether they were old cotton mills or old factories. And even in the lace market in Nottingham, you had a lot of empty buildings. I mean, now they're all kind of, the lace market now is fantastic. There's lots of like small independent businesses and bars and restaurants, and all those amazing buildings are all being used. But every now and then, someone would somehow break into one of those great lace market buildings, get a sound system set up, and that'd be it till until it got stopped. Very, very exciting times.
So in 2002, you were a consultant on the film 24-Hour Party People. Tell us a bit about that film.
Well, I mean, it's a great film. I always took the view, and I even now, if you watch any film, whether it's a big Hollywood blockbuster or an independent film, they never get the club scenes right, ever. I mean, for example, the film about Studio 54 is a great film, but those club scenes are just rubbish, absolutely rubbish. But I think Michael Winterbottom wanted to make sure that it was that when he did come, because the film's about factory records, it's not about Hacienda. People say, "Oh, what's the film about Hacienda?" So, well, it's not about Hacienda. It's about factory records, and the Hacienda is part of the film. But it was important for Michael Winterbottom, but for everyone involved in the film, that it was an accurate portrayal of what it was actually like. And ironically, the Hacienda got demolished not long before filming started. But with the original plans, because Ben Kelly, who designed Hacienda, had the original plans. So with the original plans, and by using an abandoned warehouse in the northern quarter of Manchester, they faithfully rebuilt the interior of the Hacienda. It was absolutely freaky because a few weeks before they filmed those scenes, Channel 4 News invited me, Peter Hook, and Tony Wilson to witness the interior of the Hacienda being demolished. And I remember leaving that and thinking, I wish I'd never gone to that now, because I can still remember this JCB inside going up with its big claw and tearing down the proscenium arch above the stage, and then tearing the stage to bits. And we're like, the three of us were like, oh, this is so sad. Anyway, a few weeks later, I parked my car and walked towards the warehouse. I've got directions and the address for this warehouse. And I'm walking towards this warehouse, and there's a queue of people, and they're all dressed like they were dressed in the 90s. And I'm like, what the hell? And as I'm walking past the queue, everyone's like, Parky, wait. I'm like, this is like weird. It's like going back in time. And then going into the set, which was the interior of the Hacienda, and it was absolutely exactly like it was. The lighting was the same, and they always turned the smoke machine on before they opened the doors, and it had this eerie kind of smoke blowing across the place. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember walking up the stairs to the DJ box. Mike Pickering's in there. And I've not seen him for many years, because he gave up the Hacienda in 92 to go and do M People with great success. And I hadn't really seen him for many years. And the pair of us were like, oh, this is unbelievable. Then they let the punters in, and they did exactly what they used to do when they opened the doors of Hacienda: flock through the doors straight on the dance floor. And we basically had a big rave. It was weird though, because occasionally somebody would come in the DJ box and go, right, you need to stop the music now, because we're going to do a scene. And then somebody with a megaphone would tell everyone what to do. And then Steve Coogan would walk in as Tony Wilson. And of course, his Tony Wilson was a bit of a kind of slight exaggeration on his mannerisms, a bit of a caricature. But it was just a brilliant way that he portrayed Tony Wilson. And it was like all of us were in that DJ box just like freaking out, like it was a dream, Maybe like going to the toilet was, okay, the toilet was loads of portaloos outside, but to get to the toilet, you had to go down the stairs, across the dance floor, and go through the door that said male on it, even though it took you outside. It was just the most amazing thing. And then when the film was released and we watched it, if you blink, you'll miss me, basically. It's like a split second you can see me in the DJ box. For some reason, Dave Haslam gets all the footage of the DJ in the Hacienda, which I don't quite understand, but anyway. But my name's in the credits, which is good. But when we watched the film, without question, everyone was like, that's exactly what it was like. It's the most faithful, accurate portrayal of a nightclub scene on celluloid ever, I think.
We know it's hard having to wait a whole month in between LeftLion magazines. Heck, it's difficult enough getting through the week. Worry not, listener, we've answered the call. You can get a pithy, up-to-date digest of the best stuff going on in Nottingham each week direct to your inbox every Wednesday by signing up to the LeftLion Weekly newsletter. LeftLion Weekly contains our top recommendations of events, new content, exclusive competitions and more besides. So what are you waiting for? Visit leftline.co.uk/newsletter to sign up now.
Okay, let's talk about Clubland. So you're 4 decades into knowing about nightclubs. How have you seen it change?
Well, things go in waves, don't they? Because it was like a real adventure when I started out, because the alternative club or the underground club really was underground. If you didn't know about it, there's no way you'd know about it. So you'd have to be totally invested in the music or the tribe that went there. But the thing about the garage and the Hacienda and those kind of clubs, it's when the underground started to become overground. I think I put that down to ecstasy and the kind of the inclusivity of that ecstasy brought and the positive message of house music. So in the late 80s, people stopped hanging out in their tribes and going to their club that just played the music they liked. And don't forget, most clubs were just commercial clubs anyway, weren't they? Played stuff in the charts. And people started to kind of mix in different groups more. And like, as we said earlier, 88, when the whole thing exploded and kind of the British club culture took off. And then it was a steady rise through the 90s. The so-called superstar DJ, which still does my head in, because when I started, the DJ was just someone that you weren't really aware of, somebody somewhere in the corner playing music. It was about the music. It was about the artists and the songs, not the DJ. But that slowly changed with the so-called superstar DJ. Throughout the 90s, then Cream, Ministry, Soundgate, Crusher, everything just exploded. And then the scene starts to fragment with drum and bass and jungle and the kind of hardcore, the happy hardcore. Happy hardcore, that's an oxymoron if you ask me. But anyway, that kind of rave thing, everything went off its tangents, but it still came under the umbrella of kind of British club culture, which is very unique, I think. And then, of course, you get to New Year's Eve, and I think that was peak rave culture, because I remember I did about 6 gigs on Millennium's Eve, 1999, 2000, and they were all pretty much a bit of a disappointment, really. Then the 2000s, things kind of bubbled along, but then in 2008 you had the financial crash, and that really messed everyone up. Clubs closed, promoters went out of business, and the fact we were all in our 40s perhaps meant, oh, maybe that's it now. Maybe that's it. But then nothing. I still can't remember anything coming along to replace what we'd been involved in for 20 odd years. Was it 20 years? Yeah, 88 to 2008. So over 20 years. Nothing really came along. There was Sankey's in Manchester. I was doing really well. And the Hacienda had closed. But then, I don't know, everything kind of died down. But then people then started asking, would you come? People thought that we'd all retired, but we hadn't retired. We were still kind of beavering away doing our thing. But it wasn't as headline as it was. We were just doing gigs that people would come to, but it wasn't, the press weren't writing about it. But then I think with the rise of social media and people becoming connected online, because I was quite an early adopter of all the different platforms, things started to kind of start to bubble up. And then I think people realized that the reason we were still here is because we knew what we were doing and we're still pretty good at what we were doing. And then it was in 2015 that me and a guy called Fletch, the Hacienda manager, because we started doing Hacienda nights again by the late 2000s, early 20 teens. We came up with the idea of Hacienda Classical because I was getting sick of people expecting Hacienda nights just to be about the classics. Because Hacienda was never about the classics, it was all about playing new music. And that's how Hacienda Classical came about, because I thought, well, how can we keep these people who just want to hear the classics happy? And that's how the idea came about, which means that Hacienda club nights have gone from strength to strength in the past 10 years. So when we do the Warehouse project in Manchester, you've got 8,000 people there. 80% of those people weren't even born when the Hacienda closed. So what you do is you play to the crowd in front of you. That's what I've always done, right? Never plan too much what you're going to do, which I think is a big mistake that younger DJs make. They plan everything too much. So then if you're not careful, you can fall flat on your face, because if what you planned isn't what the crowd want, what you're going to do. So if you've got 8,000 people in the Warehouse project and most of them weren't born when Hacienda closed, then obviously you're going to play more contemporary stuff and newer stuff. And if you are going to drop any classics, I like to dig out the classics that people have forgotten about, because there's so many DJs of my generation, and I'm not going to name names, I'm not knocking them, but they when I'm on lineups with people who've been around as long as I have, I can guarantee there are about 20 big tunes from the 90s that they will all play, and you'll hear those tracks more than once. So I avoid them because I know they're going to get played. But if I dig out those tunes that people have not forgotten about, but they don't hear very often, the response from people who remember them is amazing. But the response from a younger crowd, to them, it's like hearing something new. So that's what I try and do. I try and, mix it up with a combination of newer stuff, but classic stuff that's less played. That's kind of so. But of course, now you had the EDM movement of the 2000s, which just made everything ridiculously commercial, and then that died down. But now you've got hard techno. My son's 19; he's banging to his hard techno. He makes it. It's very impressive. I can't say I like it, but what he's doing is very impressive. But I think hard techno is like EDM was 15 years ago. So all the kids who are into hard techno, they'll soon get fed up of it and then start to, discover why hard techno exists. Like all the EDM people start to look and find out why it existed. So there's lots of great young producers around who make amazing music, a lot of which sounds like the stuff that I was playing in the 80s, which I think is really exciting. So if you can play original 80s house music with modern music that's heavily influenced by the 80s, to me that's a really good, exciting place to be. Because imagine playing the same set every week for 40 years. You couldn't do it. You just can't do it. And also as well, some gigs I go to, you can see some of the older crowd, people who've been clubbing as long as I've been DJing. You can feel that some of those people are getting a bit fed up of hearing the same classics, And also as well, it's annoying when you are playing these big shows, these big festivals, and there's no warm up DJs. Everyone comes on and just bangs out the fucking tunes from the start. So, but you see, I still love what I do. People still want me to do it, and I still love doing it. And one of the reasons I love doing it, like I said earlier, I play music I like, and people like what I play, and that's not changed. If any of that changes, then I'd have to question what I was doing. But I get a real joy in digging out, ripping the brown tape off a brown box of records that I've not opened for 20 years or 30 years. I wonder what's in here. And there's always stuff that gets overlooked and forgotten about. And I'll digitize it and play it. And the people who remember it will be their faces and that's like, oh, I can't believe it. But again, everyone else who's maybe never heard it's like, whoa, what the hell's this? And then they get confused because they try and Shazam it and it doesn't come up. And then they'll come to me and go, what was that track? Oh, it was this. Then they come back and go, I can't find it anywhere online. Well, you won't, you see, because it never came out or it was only ever 1,000 copies released. And then you get these young DJs going, can I give you my email address? Can you send it to me? And I'm like, no, go and find your own obscure classic tracks. Thank you very much.
Yes. So you've done a fair bit of radio DJing as well as club DJing. How do those two things differ?
Completely different. Because when you are DJing, whether you're in a small, like I did a daytime gig in Wrexham on Saturday, 250, maybe 300 people in the afternoon, right? Or whether you're playing to thousands in the Warehouse Project, whether you're playing at an outdoor festival with thousands, everything from 200 to 2,000 or even more, you've got to play to the crowd and you feed off the crowd and hopefully the crowd feed off you. And there's an energy, whether it's a festival or a small basement club, there's an energy that everyone kind of feeds off. But on the radio, you are talking to one person. Even if you've got hundreds or thousands of people listening, you're talking to one person. And also on the radio, you've got to get some of your personality across. And so you talk about the music and you've got to be passionate about the music and sometimes explain why you're playing something. Because on the radio, you can take risks. You can play stuff that you couldn't play in a club. And it's a completely different atmosphere. So when it really bugs me how everyone seems to have a radio show now. It's like everyone's a DJ. Everyone makes music. Everyone's on the radio. Great. Technology has democratized the whole process, and that's good. However, it means that there's so much rubbish that gets made and so much rubbish that gets produced as a radio show. And I'm very lucky that my first introduction to radio, I was always a big radio fan. John Peel, when I was a teenager, John Peel, that was an education in itself. And I loved his broadcasting style because obviously I was listening to Radio 1 in the daytime, and of course all that kind of smashy and nicey stuff and Top of the Pops. But then you listen to John Peel and go, oh my God, he's really passionate about the music and he doesn't talk complete and utter bollocks. And even though he's broadcasting to the nation, you always got that sense he was talking to you. And then when I lived in Nottingham, I got very frustrated at there was a dance show on Radio Trent, Craig Strong, and he was ignoring like all this amazing dance music, like all the early house stuff, even like the commercial stuff like S Express, and why is Radio Trent not playing Voodoo Ray when I'm aware in Manchester on Piccadilly, Stu Allen is playing Voodoo Ray. He's playing all the early house stuff. He's playing hip hop. Craig Strong, he's got this Friday night dance show and he's just still playing the kind of commercial dance stuff. And I used to ring him up or leave messages for him. He'd never get back to me. Or I'd go into Radio Trent. Oh no, Craig Strong's not here. He does Friday nights. When's he in? That's different. And then in the end, I thought, fuck it. And I sat on the steps of Radio Trent on a Friday night before his show went out and waited. And sure enough, about an hour before the show, up walks this little guy with a big tash. Craig Strong, yeah, I'm Graeme Park. And he went, Oh, right. Yeah, you're the guy who keeps leaving all the messages. They started making all these, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so busy like that. And I went, well, listen, I've got some records here that I really think you should be playing, and kind of put him on the spot. So he kind of like, oh, you better come in. You better come in. And in the end, because I just badgered him so much, he let me do a mix on the show every Friday, a live mix. And in the end, I ended up doing stuff that he didn't want to do, like helping him answer the phone and all that stuff. But that was my introduction to radio. I thought, oh, I really this is really good. And when I moved to London, I was quite often a guest on Kiss FM in London when it lodged legally. And my first radio show, I got asked to cover overnights because Sarah HB was ill, and Gordon Mack, who ran Kiss FM, rang me up and said, "Oh, you're a guest on Kiss quite a lot. Do you fancy covering Sarah HB's show tonight and for the rest of the week?" I remember saying, "Oh my God, Gordon, I can't believe you've asked me." And he went, "Well, to be honest, mate, you're the fifth person I've asked. No one can do it." I went, "I don't care. I live in Clapham. You're in Islington. I'll be there in an hour." So I did that week of radio on Kiss. And then when Kiss launched in Manchester, they asked me to do a weekend show, and then ended up doing daytimes. Then I ended up doing Kiss, the whole Kiss network. So the Northeast, Yorkshire, Manchester, West Midlands, and the Southwest. Then Kiss became Galaxy. The people who ran Kiss in Manchester started a station in Liverpool called Crash FM, which I did a show on there. Crash became Juice. Then there was a Juice in Brighton. And then I had a show on Radio 4th in Scotland. And then I left Galaxy and went to Key 103 in Radio City, Key 103 in Manchester, Radio City in Liverpool. But then in 2008, financial crash, lost all those contracts. So that was me off the radio for many years. But in recent years, I did go back to Key to do the Bauer Network Saturday Night Dance Show, which is 17 stations all around the country. Did that for a few years. And then recently I was doing breakfast on a station called Mom Spaghetti. Did that until December, but it's a great station. Hip hop, house, and happiness. That's what the strapline was. So to me, it was a no-brainer to play hip hop, house, and happiness. Happiness is a way of saying stuff that's not hip hop or house. But to do it live, 6 till 9 weekday mornings, was really exciting. But I'm so busy with everything else, something had to give. So, because I'm a part-time senior lecturer in Wrexham as well. So something had to give. And unfortunately, the thing that pays the least well has to give. And sadly, that was breakfast show. So, but I do still do my weekly syndicated radio show, the Long Live House radio show. But again, it's like, it's an opportunity to play the best new music there is and also dig out those forgotten classics. But when you're on the radio, you're talking to one person. And I think when you listen to other club DJs who get asked to do radio shows or do stuff, do podcasts, or I don't want to mention names, but there's a digital dance station that's on around the country, and I just think the music's great, but all the presenters, they talk too much, and they talk like they think they're supposed to talk, and it's so annoying. I can't listen. That's just my view. But but the thing is, the radio landscape's changed, because I remember it was the very early days of networking. I remember one day Craig Strong saying, "Great news, Graham. We're now going to be not just on Radio Trent, we're going to be on Leicester Sound and Ram FM in Derby, because the company, we're all owned by the same company, and they're going to network the 3 stations on a Friday night and at weekends." And that was really exciting until he said, "So when you play the adverts, you've got to play these adverts for Nottingham, these adverts for Derby, and these adverts for Leicester." What? But I was learning about how radio worked all the time. Because now, all those traditional independent stations that are all around the country, they've got a great heritage. They still exist, but they're all networked. And the breakfast shows come from London, the drive shows come from London, and you get very little local programming. But people still think they are local because the jingles and the adverts are local and the news is local. It's just not the same as it was. But it's all about saving money and making money. That's the difference. So that's why community radio is so important now. But of course, you don't get paid to be on community radio. And that's why I think the BBC is still important, because it's a public service broadcaster. So you still have, I know it's television, but you still have East Midlands Today and West Midlands Today and Northwest Tonight and Look North and all that stuff. But the whole media landscape's changed. So that's why my syndicated radio show goes out on loads of different stations, a lot of community stations and a lot of internet stations and stuff. But I do enjoy doing radio because if you do it properly, it's just a good medium.
Oh. 5 or 10 years ago, I read that you worked on a project called Embrace the New. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so since 2008, I've been a lecturer in creative media at Wrexham University. And about 5 years ago, 2018, a new lecturer started called Glenn Hanstock, whose background was he's a director, or an award-winning director. And because we live near each other, we used to share the journey into Wrexham twice a week, because we both did the same days, Wednesdays and Thursdays in Wrexham. And we got to know each other on our journey, whether it was train or driving. And we're a similar age, similar background, similar interests. And we just said, well, you're a director, and with my contacts, maybe we could try and come up with some ideas for a film. And we threw ideas around, and his ideas, I would go, mate, that's rubbish. My ideas, he'd go, who's going to watch that? It was just constant ideas that we'd each dismiss each other's ideas. And then one day, I think it was the conversation was, I can't believe that I'm in my mid-50s and I'm still as busy as I have been. Hacienda Classical's just gone through the roof. Never thought it'd be so big. Peter Hook's like in his 60s, and Mike Pickering's fast approaching 70, and Johnny Marr's the same age as me. And look at what he's doing. And then Glenn was like, that's it. That's the film. It's about older creatives still being as creative as they always have been. And I went, yeah, that's it. And so we came up with the idea, and the name Embrace the New came about. And I was very lucky in that I can pick up the phone to Johnny Marr, to Noel Gallagher, to Marshall Jefferson. You know, I was just thinking of people in their 50s, basically. Rasheen Murphy, who was about to be 50 then. She's in her 50s now. See, I'm doing this documentary. So Glenn was the director and I was the producer. Peter Hook, just ring people up. And not one person said no. They said, yeah. Sean Ryder, Melanie Williams. Anyway, so we started filming, and we used the creative media students to help us out. And we got permission to borrow some of the equipment from university as well. And we spent about 6 months filming all these people. Then we had spent months going to Channel 4, Sky, Netflix, Amazon, the BBC, blah, 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 blah. Lots and lots of interest, but it was so frustrating because, lots of interest, but we're getting nowhere. And in the end, people were saying, right, on the 19th meeting in London at Sky or at bloody Channel 4, it was like, tell you what we're going to do then. You go make it, we'll buy it off you. We're like, no, we need the money to make it. We've got all these interviews in the can, but we, for example, would love to get, say, Debbie Harry in it, or we were picking out the kind of older musicians, performers, creatives So we thought, well, we're not making it and selling it to you. No, we think this is something we want to be totally involved in. So we went and we did a crowdfunder. But then I thought Glenn's budget was too low and people wouldn't take us seriously. Because to make something like this, you need like £150,000 minimum. But Glenn was saying, let's go 50 grand. We can make something. I'm like, no, people aren't going to take us serious. Let's go 100 grand. Anyway, we went to something like 75. And unfortunately, we missed out by £3,000 or £4,000. And so if you don't reach your target, the whole thing doesn't happen. Everyone gets their money back. So then we had to go back to square one. But then pandemic hit, didn't it? So forget that, forget everything. Post-pandemic, trying to get the thing back on the go again. But of course, everyone's now 5, 6, 7 years older than when we filmed them. So we're at that position now. We still think it's a goer, but we have to re-examine how we're going to do it, because we've got Johnny Marr, for example. Great interview, Johnny Marr, but it was filmed in 2018. That's like 6 years ago. So he's now the same age as me. He's 60, so he's not 54 anymore. He's 60. So I don't know, but we made an amazing trailer, and what's that cinema, that independent cinema, chain of independent cinemas? What's it called? Hang on, I've got it on my phone. Cinema. Oh no, I can't remember. There's a chain of independent cinemas, and they agreed to show the trailer before films for like months. So people were starting to get excited about it, and we did. The trailer got showed all over the country, and then the pandemic hit. So I don't know what's going to happen. Watch this space.
Okay, let's talk about the couple of gigs you've got coming up in Nottingham. You're playing at Pride at the end of July. What does Pride mean to you?
Well, as I said earlier, in the late 80s, Acid House and Ecstasy brought everybody together. So for the first time ever, people didn't care who you were or what your background was. And then Hacienda put on what was then called a gay night, Flesh. Of course, now Flesh still exists as an LGBTQ plus night. And also, when I first went to DJ in New York in the late 80s, without realizing it, I'd be going to these amazing nights that were just great nights, and then very slowly realizing, hang on a minute, 95% of the people in this club are men. Oh, it's a gay club, but they were the best nights. And I just think the British club culture has always been very, very inclusive, and I've always been part of that community. And it's just, I think it's important because it's, I mean, it's still, I mean, everyone, I mean, at the moment you see everyone, all the big brands have got their Pride logos, which is, great, but it's just to try and make some more money, isn't it? Or improve their public perception. But I think, although it's still difficult if you're different, if you're different in society, depending on where you are, if you're not in an inclusive space, it can still be difficult. So I think Pride is a very important thing. And I've also done Manchester Pride. I've DJed there quite a lot. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm trying to think, I can't remember if I've been to the Hidden Warehouse or not. Where is Hidden Warehouse? And don't say you don't know because you can't find it.
No, it's in the city centre. It's how to describe it? I'll tell you what, if we podcast this, I'll make sure I put a pin in it.
All right, okay. I mean, I'll have a look, but I'm not sure. I mean, recently I've done Love Zoo in the Love Zoo nights in Nottingham at the what the hell is that venue called?
It's Long Row, by the way. It's Long Row, which is
Long
where
Row,
the Hidden Warehouse is.
Was it was it ever called anything else?
It was. Oh, I'm not sure. I've not actually been in since it's in warehouse, to be perfectly honest. But it's just off the square. It's really off the
Yeah.
square up.
Well, I think I mean I'll realise when I get there. I mean, but recently I've done Love Zoo at Unit 13. Unit 13 is a great club. I think it's a fantastic venue, especially just did it up. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Me and Alistair Whitehead, because of course Alistair kind of took over for me at the garage in Nottingham. So, and he's a Nottingham lad, or he's a Derby lad really, but he's an East Midlands lad, isn't it? So that'll be a good one. But then, of course, later in the year we've got the Hacienda at Willerton Hall, which is going to be fantastic because that's got live bands. So it's not just DJs playing music, it's live bands as well. And this is an exclusive. I can't tell you where, but there's an after party somewhere. So when it all finishes, I'm going to be doing an after party. So I think that'll be really, really good as well. But I mean, obviously, although I'm from Aberdeen, I lived in Nottingham for many years. As did my late brother. He actually moved there as well. And I've got that strong connection with Nottingham. I love the East Midlands. I do love it when I visit Nottingham. And what I love is obviously I'm more known for my connections with Manchester and Hacienda, but I love it. And wherever I go in the world, or anywhere in the UK, or even like, you know, when I'm in Australia, someone will come up to me and go, "Okay, Hacienda," and all that, which is great. But I guarantee every now and then someone come up to me and go, "Garage, Nottingham," and to me that's like, yes, that's where I started, and that is like, you know, as big a part of my life as the Hacienda easily, because that's where I learned my craft. That's where I realized I wanted to be a DJ, and you know, I still see old faces from Nottingham. You know, people that I used to share houses with in Nottingham will still suddenly pop up at a club night when I'm in Nottingham, and to see those people, it's like, oh my God, you know. And it's great because I see people in Nottingham I've not seen for 35 years, but you just pick up conversations with them like you only saw them last week, you know? So I lived in Nottingham from the age of, say, 18 to 25, 26. Well, that's a crucial part of any young person's life. That's like, if you're not at university, I didn't go to university. I put it off because I did apply to go to Manchester University to do sociology and politics, right? Because I wanted to be a journalist. But I was worried if I took the time out to go and do my degree, someone else would jump into my shoes at the garage. So I thought, I'll take a year out and concentrate on DJing. Well, I'm glad I did. But so that period of your life, 18 to 25, if you're not at university, you're discovering yourself. If you're not discovering yourself at university, you're discovering yourself some other way. And to me, it was like by clubbing and playing music and learning to DJ and working in a record shop and going to see live bands. So Nottingham's always have a very special place in my heart. That sounds really cheesy, but it's true.
For 2 decades and nearing 200 printed issues, LeftLion magazine has shone a light on Nottingham's culture and entertainment scene. We believe we are part of what makes the city unique. Not many others in the country or world have a free independent press like us. LeftLion is Nottingham's meeting point for information about what's going on in our city, from the big companies and issues to the grassroots, promoters and community organisations. Our printed magazine is free to access for all, and we believe it's important it stays like that. However, we are increasingly relying upon donations from our readers to continue what we do. If you'd like to support our work, then you can do so by making a monthly pledge at Patreon/LeftLion. By pledging just £2 per month, you'll help make a real difference and will receive the digital copy of our magazine before it's available in town or on our website. If you pledge £5 per month, we'll also print your name or the name of a loved one, your band, your small business or your pet in each issue. If you can support us with a pledge of £10 per month, we'll also send you each issue through the post, and you'll receive an art print of the cover with each copy. plus occasional other free gifts too. For more details about supporting LeftLion, please visit patreon.com/LeftLion.
Graeme Park, everyone! What an amazing man and a fitting first guest to kick off this new podcast. As we mentioned, Graeme has a few appearances coming up in Nottingham over the next month or so. Firstly, he's playing at the Hidden Warehouse for Nottingham Pride on Saturday the 27th of July, alongside his old friend Alistair Whitehead, who was also mentioned in the interview. Then on Saturday the 31st of August, he's playing Hacienda live at Woollerton Hall, alongside fellow DJs like Danny Tenaglia, Roger Sanchez, and live acts like Soul to Soul, Ultranate, CC Rogers, Rowetta, 808 State and more. Tickets for both of these events were still available at the time that we recorded this podcast. Speaking of this podcast, we've got several more guests coming up over the next few months. We're happy to let you know we'll be interviewing the incredibly talented human beatboxer The Peatbox, the wonderful hip-hop inspired illustrator Emily Catherine, and the soulful singer-songwriter Dowdy Matsiko, all between now and September. Those 3 interviews I've mentioned are also being recorded at live events at Nottingham Central Library, so if you're not content with just listening on here, you can come along in person. Tickets are free thanks to the generous funding of the Arts Council England. Find out more and book yourself a place at leftlion.co.uk/library. Thanks for listening right to the end. See you next time. Bye.